Frank Isola from the New York Daily News rejoins us here on the Rich Eisen Show. Frank, you got a take on which one of those series that you want to vote on there?
Well, Memphis is going to be at home, so I could see them forcing a Game 7, and then they have beaten the Spurs before. But if I'm going to take any team, and I know I could be crazy for saying this, I still might take the Clippers. With Chris Paul. And I still think he can will them to victory. I still think he can will them to victory. Remember too, Joe Johnson has been great in the series, but they're going to need him to be maybe great one more time.
Yeah, I mean, he has been great towards the end, and Austin Rivers clearly didn't have his sea legs under him last night. He was scoreless in his return to the court. I look at Chris Paul and I feel for him. Does that make sense? Frank?
He's a terrific player. He's a terrific player. Players around him, and obviously the players around him. Now, last year, the always got hurt. Now, last year, the round series, he got hurt, and against round Portland, or I should say the first round series against Portland, or I should say the first round. They always seem to have bad luck. They always seem to have. When everybody wants to talk about breaking him up, where are you going to get a point guard as good as Chris Paul? San Antonio Spurs go in the first round. San Antonio Spurs go in the first round. I agree with you. Game 7. I agree with you. We've always wanted them to play. We've always wanted them to play. Maybe it'll happen. Golden State. Maybe it'll happen for them to win the final 2 games. For them to win the final 2 games of this series.
So who's the best team not named the Warriors that you think that's out there? And put them all in a hopper. Is it still the Cavaliers to you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, LeBron. Look at what he did in that first round series, and we get on LeBron all year long, wanting to rest and take games off. He actually earned his rest now because all he ever does is win first round playoff series. They've played a little bit better defensively. The series was probably a lot closer than a 4-0 sweep because remember, C.J. Miles had a chance to win the Game 1, missed that jumper. Game 3, I don't know how Indiana blew that lead, but Cleveland somehow finds a way to prevail, and now LeBron, who loves to rest, is getting about 5 or 6 days off, so more power to LeBron.
Isn't it amazing that after all this time, after all this talk and all this heat that is brought upon the league, and I don't want to put it all on his shoulders because he wasn't the only one to do it. The Cavs weren't the only team to do it. But when it all comes down to it, the Warriors and the Cavs have all this time off and all this rest. I guess they wouldn't have swept if they didn't have all that rest. Frank?
Exactly, and this is why it's not going to be good for the league. I kept saying that we need Cleveland. We needed Cleveland to lose a couple of games in the first round, and it won't be great for the league in the short term for them to not make the finals. But maybe in the long term it would have been better. So this way they would take the regular season maybe a little bit more seriously because they're a better team than Boston. They should have had more wins than Boston did. But now LeBron earned his rest, and that's what I always think about it too. Whenever they sweep a series, something always tells me a guy like Dan Gilbert, the owner of the team, somewhere in the back of his mind must be thinking, shouldn't we just lose this one game? We'll play the Game 5 in our building. I'll make all that extra money, and then we'll get instead of 5 days off, we'll get 4 days off.
Frank Isola of the Daily News joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. What are you hearing about Steve Kerr? Everybody on the West Coast who knows him and is close to the Warriors say that he may be done, period. Like, it's not just for the playoffs, that he may just not be able to physically coach anymore. What are you hearing, Frank?
Yeah, and that's basically what's out there right now in the league, and you feel so badly for him because he's really been suffering now for 2 years, and he had to take all that time off last year. It looked like things were getting better, and, I mean, he's experiencing so much discomfort with the headaches that he's been having. They're in good hands with a guy like Mike Brown, who coached in the finals before with the Cleveland Cavaliers. They have a very good staff there. Ron Adams has been around forever. What's interesting about it, too, if Jeff Hornacek didn't take the Knick job, he was first in line to replace Luke Walton on the Warriors bench. So think about that. Jeff Hornacek right now could be coaching the Golden State Warriors. You think there'd be he would prefer that as opposed to what's going on in New York right now? Maybe the money wouldn't be the same, Rich, but I think the results would be a lot better.
Well, I mean, I guess it's tough to turn down a head coaching job in the NBA, regardless of the situation, and knowing that, Big Chief Triangle, to use the phrase from back in the day, would be right there. Let me ask you this about Porzingis. What leverage does he have other than the fact that fans want him to be happy, sitting here at age 21, blowing off his farewell, chit-chat with Phil Jackson and company?
No, it doesn't look good for him, and I mean, you can't condone what he did. When your boss says that they want to meet with you, and Steve Mills, the general manager, is going to be there, and the head coach of the team is going to be there, you should be there. And if it were a guy like Kobe Bryant or Carmelo Anthony that blew it off, it'd be even a bigger story. And he, 3 days later, he got on a plane and flew out back to Latvia, and who knows when he's going to come back to New York. So I think, for Phil Jackson, Kristaps Porzingis has been one of the bright spots of Phil Jackson's run here in New York. So, for him to get rid of him, that's going to have to take some type of trade that really blows him over. And I mean, I think it's on the table now. I don't think it would happen, but I think something that a month ago we would have said, there's no way they're going to trade Porzingis. But the way this kind of ended this season, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that it could happen. And, Porzingis has, come out. He was in Latvia and he said some things about, he's not happy with the direction of the franchise. I give him credit for this. I mean, he's a smart enough kid at 21, now going on 22, to realize that there's a lot of dysfunction in the Knicks organization. I still think he probably should have handled it differently and met with Phil Jackson, Steve Mills, and Jeff Hornacek on that final day, the day of the exit meet.
What about Paul George in Indiana? That season's over, and now we're going into eventually, at least they are now, the Pacers going into the first offseason under the new collective bargaining agreement that is arranged, if I'm not mistaken, in a way to prevent super teams from forming, where Paul George may join, Cleveland, or may join another team that's on the verge of a championship or makes the championship round in the same way that the Warriors did. What about Paul George, Frank?
Yeah, the word is that Paul George is hoping that he can afford a house in your expensive neighborhood out in L.A., because I think that's what it comes down to. I think he wants to play in L.A. The Magic Johnson was on the Jimmy Kimmel show pretty recently and basically committed tampering by mentioning Paul George. And, when the name was brought up, he kind of winked like, yeah, of course we'd like to get him. But you're right, though. The league is trying to stop these super teams from forming. And if Paul George went to the Lakers, it would certainly not be a super team. But this summer will be very interesting, because we know that Boston spoke to Indiana about Paul George, and there's a relationship there with Danny Ainge and Larry Bird, just like there's a relationship with Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. So I think for Indiana, I think they still want to re-sign Paul George, and they can give him the most money. So money still talks everywhere, especially in the NBA. But I think if Boston could put together a pretty attractive package, I could see Larry Bird doing that. But as you know, Rich, Paul George could tell the Boston Celtics, you can do anything you want, but when I'm a free agent next summer, I have every intention of testing the market, and I can't guarantee you that I'm going to return. So that could kind of hold up a potential deal. But I think his future will be big over the next few weeks, going into the NBA draft and, of course, free agency. I could see something happening with Paul George.
And who are you hearing is first overall in that draft, as we're a few weeks away?
I think a lot of it depends on who gets the number one pick. I think if the Lakers get the number one pick, I think Lonzo Ball would be the guy. But most teams seem to like Markelle Fultz, the kid from Washington. That team, I know the Boston Celtics like him a lot, and Boston, as of right now, has the best chance of getting the number one pick, because obviously Brooklyn's pick will be transferred over to the Boston Celtics. So, there are a lot of people, too, who like the kid from Kansas, Jackson, even over Lonzo Ball. So what will be great is, the night, what the NBA does now, the night of the draft lottery, they actually bring a lot of the top prospects into town, and they're actually in the venue on that night of the draft lottery. So on that night, not only could we get Lonzo Ball, but we could also get LeVar Ball. So can you imagine if it's a team, I don't know, throw out the team out there that wins the number one pick that might not be the most desirable place for Lonzo Ball? Can you imagine the father, like within 20 minutes after the draft lottery results come out, he's killing the team that might be thinking about taking his son? You tell me that can't happen?
Yeah, you got LeVar, Lonzo, and ping pong. Those are all the balls for that night. You could just get them all.
All we need is ding dong there.
You could use that, Frank.
Foursome. Exactly. Thank you.
There you go. Take care of yourself, Frank. Thanks for coming on, brother. Appreciate it.
Have fun in Philadelphia. Take care.
I will do my best. Thank you. That's Frank Isola.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.